Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the September 2022 CaptureCast. I'm Chris Harris, Senior Enrollment Strategist here at Capture, and today we're going to talk about building a stronger graduate funnel. So tactical advice and best practices, and hopefully when we get done today, we're going to talk about our ideas and how you can implement your best practices for communicating with students, because it's not just about buying names anymore. I think one of the things that we've all learned as we talk to each other in the industry, especially on the grad side, is that buying names isn't just enough anymore. So we're going to talk about those strategies and much, much more today. So what we're going to talk about today is pretty simple. One, how can we identify more prospective students using a dynamic mix of recruitment and marketing channels? So we're going to talk about how and where we should be talking to students. Two, how do we build a robust and goal-achieving inquiry and application pool by communicating through digital streams? I say streams, it's more than one stream. So instead of paddling up one stream, you're paddling up 5 or 6 different streams as you go through this. And three, how do we leverage the data to help focus your counseling team, determine your true ROI for your digital spend, and avoid that one thing that enrollment managers love to do, but get in trouble all the time, which is overspend, right? So we're going to talk about those things today. But for those of you who are new to the CaptureCast, I want to welcome you wherever you are. If it's good afternoon to you, if you're on the East Coast, or if it's good morning, if you're out there in Hawaii. But a little bit about who we are. Capture, simply put, is the higher education's leading enrollment marketing and recruitment organization. Our focus is to help our partner institutions realize their enrollment goals by leveraging the industry's only behavioral intelligence platform. We do this because we identify, convert, and enroll the best students for your college or university every year. And we do this in a managed way. Driven by real-time data, our team of enrollment experts, customer relations specialists, and real data scientists help our partner institutions navigate this very dynamic and ever-changing higher education recruitment landscape by using the industry's only behavioral intelligence platform. With one platform, not a bunch of tools just stacked on top of each other, we're able to reach more students, identify those students, convert them into applications and enrollments for you every year. So as we typically do with all of our Capture Casts, we like to start off by talking to you, our consumers. So Sierra, we're going to pop in a poll right now, but the poll is simple, a simple question, and it's something that we're reading about a lot right now that is out there in the atmosphere, which is, how are you feeling more? Are you feeling more pressure than usual to grow your graduate enrollment on campus? With the enrollment cliff coming, with a decrease, and it's actually been the last 12 years or so in undergraduate enrollment. I know a lot of colleges and universities have started to say, hey, you MBA program, you education program, you whatever program, we need you to put more enrollment in there to help with the NTR at the end of the day. So we'll take this quick little poll, and we're looking at it. And as you can see, it's kind of moving around a little bit, but what you're seeing is the ability for people to recognize that they are starting to feel that pressure on a day-to-day basis. We talk to hundreds of colleges and universities, and what we're seeing is that there's pressure to build new programs and launch new programs, but there's also realization that you need to grow your current programs as well. So program prioritization is something that faculty don't want to ever hear about, but it is something that's happening on college campuses around the nation. So we're going to take a look at the results right here. Let's give it another 10 seconds or so. And let's go ahead and pull it up, and we're going to take a look at it. So right now, 71% of you say, oh my goodness, yes, the pressure is real. So you guys are feeling it. Another 6% are feeling, I'm losing sleep over this and I need some help. And then we have a good bit of you saying, we have a good plan, but we need to clean it up a bit. I think that's where we kind of are right now, is in that cleanup stage. We just got done with this fall recruitment class. And one of the things that we're looking at is, how is it that we get out there to make sure that we are in a situation so that we are being more successful as we go through. So thank you, Sierra, for running that for us. Great poll question today. So what's happening right now? We're going to talk about changing demographics a little bit. We're going to talk about the leaky funnel issues. And then we're going to talk yield management, and then we're going to bring in my friend and colleague Chase Davis, and he's going to really help us get through how we're going to continue to recruit students. So first, changing demographics. So I think the big thing right now that's out there is we have 2.8 million students enrolled in graduate. This was this past spring, which was a contraction from 2021. We were at about 3.1 million in the spring. So what we're looking at is a contraction. And I think that has a lot to do with a couple things. One, it has to do a little bit with the changing demographic, and that not as many students are graduating from college because the number of students that are going to college has been down. But I also think that because of the economic prowess of what's happening in the United States, more and more students have decided not to go into graduate school right away, as they typically would in the past. If you remember back in 2008, 2009, 2010, during a last recession, you did see more students from different generations headed back to college to get those graduate degrees. In talking with my colleagues and then listening to the radio and doing some reading lately, I believe that there'll be another academic downturn probably in the new year, 2023, for quarters 1 and 2. So what we'll probably see is a shift there for people headed back to school who are going to be looking to get that advanced degree, whether it's that MBA or that extra education degree, or maybe even change jobs and going into OT or PT kind of situations as well. So, but the number of non-traditional age students entering has grown as well. So typical Gen Z students right now are headed to school usually right after college, but we're starting to see more millennials and more Gen Xers actually headed back to college, getting that advanced degree and looking to push themselves into a higher earning potential. One of the things that you have to kind of keep in mind, though, is that those three generations all talk very differently and all expect to be sent advertising and marketing and recruitment materials a little bit differently. So you're going to have to go back and review what does Gen X want? What do the millennials want to hear? Those kinds of things. As you build out your programs, you have to be thinking about there's three different sets of generations that we're going to be marketing to. And lastly, test optional has become a reality for grad. Number of schools, there's about 1,800 colleges, universities that are nationwide right now that are in a situation where they've done away with test scores, whether it's at the undergraduate or the graduate level. So the number of names that you can buy has actually become less over time. And I know that there's going to be a big push coming up very soon for people to start taking the GRE and the MCAT and the LSAT and those other scores again. But what you're going to see is that colleges and universities are going to go away from that as a point of admission. So when we talk about leaky funnel issues, I think we all know that stealth inquiries and applications are still an issue. Gang, as someone once in our organization once said, if they're not visiting your website, they're not coming to your school. So be thinking about that as you're thinking about your digital advertising, as you're thinking about your placement of your ads and how you actually create your website and those interactions that you have with students there. More inquiries don't necessarily mean more applications. More apps don't mean more acceptances, and more acceptances don't mean more enrollments. We have talked to colleges, universities that are in the top 5 graduate schools in the nation over the last 18 months. And a lot of those places get plenty of applications, but they can't enroll the right number of students or the right types of students that they want for their programs. And to be thinking that one of the top 5 schools in, say, education in the nation is saying to you, we get a number of applications, but we can't enroll the best of the best. We're losing them. We're leaking these students out the side. How do we get those students? I think that's one thing that we're going to talk a little bit about today, and how we shore up that leak to make sure that that leak doesn't happen anymore at those different levels and different stages. And finally, yield management. Which communication channels do you use? We have so many now. I think because of COVID, we've really started to push things forward on the digital side, but we're having to manage that data. And how do you manage that data coming in from your digital assets, from your email, from your counselors making phone calls, from your text messaging platforms? How do you bring that all together into one place so that you can manage it, make sure that you're not overspending? And then how do you focus that outreach? Because one thing that we learned at NACAC, and I first want to say what a great trip to NACAC was this year. Houston, congratulations. It was a wonderful, wonderful NACEC this year. Hats off to the NACEC planning committee and the executive team for putting on a great program for us this year. I know that all of the vendors got to see a number of people, but the programming that was there this year was top notch. When we talk about resilience, we're talking about these admissions counselors and these assistant directors and these directors who on a day-to-day basis are trying to manage all of this data and all of this change and all of these things on a day-to-day basis, and they're rock stars. And how do we use the word resilience with them to make sure that they are being focused upon and using that data to help focus their outreach so that they're not wasting their time, so that they feel that sense of accomplishment as we go through. So let's get started with the big part of today's conversation. We want to bring in our friend Chase Davis, our senior executive advisor. Chase, good to see you. Welcome. And how are things? For those who don't know, Chase is in Florida, and he is on the east side of Florida. Let's just say that. We won't say where he lives, but Chase, how are you, and how's everything in Florida?
Yeah, thanks for having me today, y'all. Good afternoon, everybody. Things are good and calm as they can be where I am. So I'm thankful for that. Of course, want to be sensitive there to our friends and our neighbors over there on the western side of the state. Our thoughts are with them as they go through quite a lengthy recovery here on the storm. So just a thought there. If anyone's joining from that side, we're glad to have you, and just know that we're here for you, with you. Of course, if there's anything that we can do to support you, we're happy to do that. But thanks for having me on today. Yeah.
That's awesome. I think as we go through, I want to give you a couple of seconds here, Chase, to kind of let everybody know your background in enrollment management, because as one thing that we have found out over time is that, and you and I started the same day, which was kind of interesting, coming off of two campuses, having long bouts. I don't want to say long. I've been in it longer than you have, I think, probably by a couple of years, right? At least two.
You.
Probably too many. But give us a little background of you as you go that, because I think this is going to help inform your approach later in our slide deck.
Yeah, absolutely. So prior to coming to Capture, I was on campus for 12 different years. For a nice sizable time there, working across different populations. So undergraduate, graduate, online, continuing ed, some of the special populations as well. So I spent 12 years there. And prior to jumping over here to Capture, I was over all of those different populations here in South Florida at an institution. Also, interestingly enough, and Chris, you same situation. I was a partner of Capture while on campuses, and I spent 5 years across 3 different campuses as a partner of Capture's on that side of the desk. And so that was a tremendous experience. Really love what we do here, and of course our people. And so yeah, that's where I come from.
Yeah, I kind of feel for you. Now you say 12 years. Before I started to Capture, I spent 25 years. So obviously, you're older than me. We all know that for sure. Um, but yeah, spending 25 years on the other side, and to your point, Chase, I was an early adopter of Capture, bringing it onto 2 different campuses and having great results. Largest freshman class on 2 different campuses, and I can attribute most of that success to Capture. And given the opportunity to come over to this side, it's been a great learning experience, because now we know how the sausage is made on a day-to-day basis on our side. So great to have you here, Chase. Appreciate you joining us today. So first off, Chase, we're going to really talk about identify more prospective students. One of the things that we talk about is making sure that we have these issues out there, right? Most potential graduate students will explore your website before they raise their hands. Traditional sources like GMAT, GRE, and LSAT are becoming more optional. And different generations and things like that are starting to come back to school, and we're starting to see that more. When we talk about our solutions, Chase, and one of the things that we kind of typically work on is development of different types of tools that we use through the Engage platform. Can you kind of walk us through a little bit? And I will pop up some solutions here, but let's really talk about the journey of the student, right? And this is not you and I talked about this the other day. It's a good representation. It's not a great representation, because there's so many ins and outs now, the ability to do so. But kind of talk to me a little bit about this immersive journey that these prospective students are taking with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was really interesting there on the slide before where we talk about how most graduate students are going to explore the website before they raise their hand and they inquire. And I think it's important to also recognize that so many graduate students will not want to raise their hand necessarily and be a little bit more covert there in what they're doing, especially from the traditional route, right? And so they
Right.
see a form on your website. They may decide, I don't really want a phone call right now, so maybe I won't fill out that form. I think that that's where this comes in terms of what we're doing from a marketing perspective. We see different routes here, and while this is laid out kind of linearly as our graphic shows, there's so many different ways that a student actually may come into your website, and that's represented here through your digital ads, right? Maybe some emails if you've already got their email address and their record. You're sending them emails, we're sending them emails if we're a partner, and then all your digital advertising, et cetera. And I think it's important to recognize that there are graduate students and prospects who are going to say, hey, I'm not raising my hand in the traditional manner. And that's part of where we can come in. And you can see that there with our behavioral email series and the PID form completion is that we are doing these things based on specific behavioral rule sets. And so we're finding those students who are in their journey at the point where it makes sense for us to deliver that content to hopefully increase the likelihood that they will say, okay, I'm ready to raise my hand now and I want you to have my information. And so I think it's really important to see how that journey works here and then continuing on to them engaging with one of our either virtual events or something there on your campus, and then moving into that apply campaign that we may serve on the website to push them to make that application. And then, of course, we want them to complete that application and ultimately enroll with you.
I think that's one thing that you talked about, and you've said it a couple of times there, Chase, is the word behavior. It's not enough anymore to have that drip campaign that's out there running off your CRM.
Right.
Not that the CRM is a bad thing, right? I mean, I can remember when we didn't have CRMs. I can remember back when we would have
Yes.
green bar reports and we would, write handwritten notes. And the handwritten notes are always a good thing in my book still to this day. But, um, you know, having that CRM there to be able to drip campaign stuff, but the use of behavioral data as a student interacts with your digital strategies and your digital assets on a day-to-day basis is so very strong. And you kind of touched upon it, using the dynamic content to generate those leads using a PID form. It's different
Right.
than a regular RFI form that people just throw out there, right? It's just a little bit different in how that pops up. So let's talk a little bit about that PID form and um, how it's served. What's it mean? How are we using that in a strategic sense to make sure that it's not just like a pop-up that you get on the Home Depot website?
Right. No, that's exactly right. I think behavior again, we'll go back to that word and that concept is that we want to ensure that we're delivering that content at the right time, of course, to the right students so that they are more likely to give you good information and give that information with the intent that you're going to engage with them and vice versa. And I think that the PID form absolutely does that. So we're identifying those students. They come to your website and let's say they are perusing, looking around different web pages, but we know they hit an admissions, maybe a graduate admissions page. And then we also know that in their journey, they've gone through and we're tracking them. They're able to look at a couple academic pages. We know now this is somebody who's more interested than just, I came to your website on a whim. They've actually started to drill down into an academic program. Do you have this type of program? It's time for us to display an identification form. So we know they're deeper in their journey, and it's time for us to find out who they are and what they want more information about. And not only with the display are we able to be behavioral, we're also able to show you that form and have that react to some of the responses that you put on that form, right? You're interested in a specific area of study. Now let's show you a different set of majors or whatever the start date may be based on the time of the year. And so I think that that's really important. This form helps us not only produce leads for a campus and an institution to grow that top part of the funnel, but also for us to identify some of those stealth visitors in a more non-traditional way than a static RFI on the side of your webpage, right? We now are doing it at the right time. If they don't want to do it the first time, we can come back the second time at a different time that would be right for them. So that's really the power of the progressive identification form.
And I think to your point there too is it doesn't have to come up on your website all the time. We have
Right.
a number of partners who write these really, and it's because of you guys, our account executives, helping out. It's creating those rule sets where I know of one of our partner institutions that you have to visit their page 4 times before they'll even allow you to have a PID form served to you because they want to know that there's a commitment, at least to come back
Exactly.
3 or 4 times. And I think that really bodes well because as you gather that data, and we're going to show that here in a second here on a DVR report. But at the end of the day, being able to measure that student and identify that student is a big deal. So as we move in, we're building that robust and dynamic communication flow. A lot of times, our communications are reactive versus proactive, meaning it's that drip campaign, right? It's that thing that just happens on a whim kind of situation, or maybe your admissions counselors, if you don't have that CRM, and we're still talking to institutions that don't have CRMs right now, where they're doing that outreach by hand. It's more reactive. That student raised their hand, boom, here comes something else. And we're starting to see those different generations coming back, especially in the grad side, and being able to take and understand that Gen Z expects to get that digital advertising, or maybe that millennial, that Gen X is real suspect about getting that digital ad. Like, my wife is notorious for this. She'll say we'll be talking about something, and then she'll pull up Facebook or something like that, and there's an ad for Adidas when I just bought over here on the other side of the room on my phone, my son a pair of new Adidas shoes. They'll be delivered tomorrow. All of a sudden, then Katie gets to see that on her side. So, we're talking about those issues that are there. So, um, we need to meet those people where they are. We need to meet them how they want to be contacted, whether it is via email, whether it is a text message, whether it is a phone call, those kinds of things. And I think that's an important part of how we send out dynamic content and how we can take over using the behavioral data that we have. I think the word that I heard at NACAC more than anything is that how are you measuring behavior? And I said, oh, we do it well. We've been doing it for over a decade now, but people are starting to understand that it's not just the message, it's not just the value statement,
Right.
it's how you serve it, when you serve it. And Chase, one of the things that we talk about is dynamic content to nudge those students and to be there where they are and when they are. So I have some examples from Faux State. If you've ever been to Faux State
It's a
before,
great school.
that's a great school.
Great
It's in
school.
Faux State, and it's a great place to be. But at the end of the day, this is some examples of things that we have done to create a better process and a better way to deliver messaging at the right time to students. So, Chase, can you kind of talk a little bit about the dynamic content that's offered here?
Absolutely. So, we have a few different items that we will do for you. Specifically, we have pop-ups that are on your website, and then we also do triggered emails. And so, in addition to your PID form, these are ways, little nudges that we can show to your students, your prospects when they're on the website to drive them to a specific action or the next right step for them, again, based on that behavior that we've identified as we've tracked them along their journey. I think it was really important to you brought up, Chris, earlier, the different segments of generations, right? And so with graduate recruitment, when you're recruiting for undergraduate, you really have what's the latest generation that we need to be talking to. But
Right.
with graduate, you're potentially 3, 4 different generations that we could be speaking to. And I think that's important because with our dynamic content like this, we can show a specific pop over to a different generation if we need to, knowing that they don't need to be served that content as often, or perhaps they need a very specific message, and we can do those kind of things with these campaigns. Of course, we always want to have a call to action. We can identify the behavior. They've been on 4 or 5 different academic pages specific to a nursing program. The deadline is coming up in 30 days and they need to get that information in. We're going to display a pop-up to them that says countdown to our application deadline for the nursing program, right? Our MSN program, we want to make sure you get that in and drive them to start that application, or potentially to complete that application if it's already on file. We want to make sure that that's happening in the background because your admissions counseling staff, of course, is going to be stretched thin at different times of the year. You've got deadlines coming up. We can help alleviate that stress and pressure on them by ensuring that we're delivering the right messages to students at the right time without them even knowing.
I think, Chase, that you just brought that up, relieving the stress, right? So one of the
Right.
things that we learned about, and I saw a couple people post on LinkedIn about that after Houston, was there is a shortage of counseling staff, admissions, enrollment professionals in the United States right now. I think I looked at it the other day before our presentation, and I think there was about 1,500 different positions that were open, everything from admissions counselors and data analysts, all the way through VPs and directors of programs. And the beauty of dynamic content is that it understands where that student is in the process, and when that student is visiting the website, it's producing a interaction that is personalized to that student, number one, and where they are in their journey to make them understand what the next step is, to see where that next step is. And I think that's an important part, that we are in that extension. You end up being the extension of the admissions office, right? Because we can't be there 24 hours a day. Gen Z's not looking to go to grad school. They're not studying that at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's more like, I'm going to eat dinner at 4:30 or 5 o'clock, and then I'm going to do some stuff, and then I'm going to study maybe, and then it's 11:30 or 12 o'clock at night, 2 o'clock in the morning, depending upon who they are. That's when you're starting to see those students hit those websites. And how are you interacting with those students at 2 o'clock in the morning? And what is triggered from that as well? I mean, if you think about triggered email and stuff like that, that's actually triggered based upon the interaction the student just had with you at 2 o'clock in the morning. And 2 hours later, then there's something served to that student as an email or
Right.
something like that. That's awesome stuff. It can be a little creepy, I would say. There's a little creep factor to that, and we're going to talk about that here in a second when we move into solution. But Chase, the dynamic content it really sets it up for that.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So let's talk about leveraging the data as well, because I think that's important, and I think everybody's talking about data right now. And Chase and I have talked about this before, and there's data, and that's science. That's science. It's if you talk to our data science guys and ladies over there in that department, it is very much focused on numbers. And I think the last conversation we had was the number of commas that you should use in an email, and there's that deep science that goes along with it. But at the same time, Chase, you and I both know this because we worked in private ed too. It's about relationships. So there is an art and a science to this, and that's how you balance it, and that's how you become a great enrollment manager, especially at the graduate level, because people are making a decision to go back to school. And not everybody had a great undergraduate experience like you and I did, but they may have struggled, or they may have decided that this is not what they wanted to do, but they see the need to go back. So what do you do? How do you contact those students, and when? Digital advertising is not cheap, let's be honest with you, and actually it's going to go up about 20% over the next 18 months, according to everything that I'm reading on in Bloomberg actually the other day.
Hmm.
And measuring ROI can be tough because, as you pointed out earlier, students can come in from all these different areas.
Right.
And how are you measuring that ROI? Was it a card that they filled out at a fair, or was it, I was on your website 2 months ago? Were you able to match those things up and get that in there so you have a full picture of what that student sees and what that student wants? Some of those solutions, strategic placement and constant contact, that kind of thing, and measuring all of that is an important part. And that's why people are looking at, if you look at some of the bigger universities, they have data scientists on staff who are just segmenting and
Full-time
segmenting,
positions.
churning,
Yep.
churning it. And then I say, but does Johnny like chocolate? And they're like, I don't know. I said, because you didn't pick up the phone and talk to Johnny and ask him if he liked chocolate. He
Right.
likes strawberry ice cream better. Those are the kinds of the conversations that you get. But one of the things that you get to do is focus your institutional counselors and those who are going to make conversations with folks more meaningful, because you know what that student is going on. So when you talk about counselor outreach, and this is what I always leaned on heavily as a dean and a director at my institutions, and I know you did too, was the thought of knowing who was where and when and how long, so that you can make that conversation a little bit more meaningful on your end. So talk a little bit about that counselor outreach and how we can use the data that we have to focus that outreach and make it more meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the The foundation of this is your daily visitor report. This is where we're sending the information of who has been on your website, anybody that we've identified through the multiple different means and ways that we do that in partnership with the institution. We're sending that information daily or at whatever schedule your team needs, customizable to them, as well as the information on that report of who we're sending. That's coming to an inbox at 6 a.m., at 8 a.m., whenever is most useful for your counselor team for outreach. And we're saying, these are the 20, 30, 40 students that were on the website for the 2023 enrollment year, or these are the inquiries or suspects or admitted students, or all of those. And that way you get to see a quick look at every student that's on the website within the last 24 hours or whatever the schedule may be. And it's going to land you right here on the screen of the shot that we have here, where you can see the entire visit history for that student on your website, every piece of dynamic content that they've engaged with, even any digital advertising campaigns that you have out there that they clicked and came through to the website. We're able to track all of that information. So, you talked about ROI and how expensive and not cheap digital advertising can be. Well, this is a great way that you'll actually see in real time students who are engaging with those campaigns, right? It's coming through. You're seeing that on your visit history, and your counselors can reach out to them based on the specific and individual URLs that they are visiting while they're on your website. So if you have, Chris Harris, and he's wondering, how am I going to go back to school, support my family, but also pay for that out of pocket over the next 2 or 3 years for my second master's or whatever it may be, you'll see that he's looking at those financial aid pages. He's looking at some of those things like tuition and fees. He may not tell you that in an email back and forth, but after you get off the phone call, he might quickly go over to that tuition and fees page. And you're going to be able to see all of that behavior right here for every identified visitor. And this will help inform exactly what you said, personalized outreach, and really getting into the nitty gritty of what those students need for their enrollment journey.
I think one of the coolest things was we would sit in our offices and we would launch an email or something like that that had some code on it, and we would just watch the returns. And we're like, oh yeah, and here's another PID form that popped in, or here's a student who's reached out, those kinds of things, and they're interacting because you see that instant ROI. But to your point, Chase, I think being able to have that data and have that information about where, and we'll use Chase this time, as Chase has gone through looking through your website, you can send Chase an email the next day saying, here's some information about financial aid. You might not want to say, hey, we saw you were on the website last night, but it might be more of a situation where you serve some information to that student or to their parents, because you can measure parent information the same way, and say,
Right.
hey, here's some information that you might be interested in. And it becomes, oh, like you were reading my mind, those kinds of things, which I think is important because, again, you're serving the information to the student where they are in their process at that point in time and what they're interested in. It's called behavioral intelligence for a reason, right? We're measuring behavior and moving through. And then let's talk about a little bit about the measurement of investment. And Chase, feel free to jump in any time. But I've used this slide before, but we talk about student data and how all of that student. I mean, this is the journey, right? This is how students enter into your program. But you're also setting out these digital strategies. Again, it's measuring everything, whether it's your dynamic content on your website, whether it's an email on your website, whether it's a conversation that your counselors have. But it all comes back to measuring what the student is interacting with and what the student is digesting, because students change channels all the time. So in the fall, you'll see, especially during the traditional travel season, students are more active on their text messages and they're more active on your digital advertising than, say, when your counselor calls in the fall, because it's the fall. There's so much going on. People are doing, whether they're testing or they're involved in sports or whatever, back to school, that kind of thing. But when it comes time to October, November, December, when financial aid starts to hit, that's when your counseling staff becomes more reliant on data to make those kinds of have those kinds of conversations. And then if you're doing any print, being able to say, okay, we're only going to send out so much print for per uh, based upon a score. Let's just say that moving forward. And Chase, you and I are working on a project right now where we've kind of measuring all of this right now, especially the digital spend, and then we're also
Right.
looking at what print looks like. How's that marriage of data and those two things work with you?
Yeah, I think, in the graduate space, it can be challenging too, right? There's not always that regular cycle like we see on the undergraduate side. And we've worked both sides, right? You and I. But on the graduate side, it's not always as clean. Sometimes, the recruitment cycle can be, 18 months long. Sometimes it's 3 months and then they dissipate. And then here they come back 6 months later and now they're really hot lead at that point. And I think that what you're seeing is that you kind of have to be churning with your digital advertising all year long if you want to have a steady hand on it. But how do you know that those strategies are actually working with you or for you? And that's where we can bring in that data. We're able to track that behavior. We can show you what's been engaged with, how they're engaging with the website, and when they're there, engaging with any of our dynamic content on the website to help inform, okay, during this time, this is where you're getting heavy hits from your nursing population, your prospects, your MSN. Maybe it's just not as heavy time for them. But then we get into the December and January time. Maybe families are seeing the close of the year and they're thinking more financially focused. Your accounting program might start getting more hits. That may be something that we see in a trend. And so that's where our behavioral data, our tracking, our strategies built together will help kind of show you, all right, we think it's one thing, but maybe it's something different. And we can now show a little more standardization to what that cycle looks like based on your interaction with your prospects and their interaction back with you.
I think the other important part of that too is, Chase, especially on the graduate level, as you and I have worked before, it's, some graduate programs have admissions folks attached to that program. But a lot of times in these smaller institutions, it's
Yes.
the dean of the MBA program, the dean of business is actually doing the outreach for that and being able to show them, our slide previously, the daily visitor report, um, you know, Dr. Johnson, these are the 12 students that you need to contact today. Here are those names. Here is what they're looking at, those kinds of things. And then, he or she can go ahead and pick out what they want to send, when they want to send it, kind of situation. So it actually brings your faculty, can bring your faculty and your deans into focus a little bit more too, especially with outreach, but then also with spend. Because at the graduate levels, each program, it seems that we've talked to, each program has its own budget for advertising and things like that. It's not a centralized enrollment management
Right.
pot of cash necessarily. So cool. Chase, thank you so very much for joining today. I appreciate it. Always good to see you, my friend. It was great to see you in Houston. And if you need anything, I'm 8 hours away, like I said yesterday. I can come down. I will come down and
Absolutely.
hang out with you. So, Chase, thanks very
Thanks,
much,
Chris.
buddy. Have a good one.
Have a good one. Bye bye.
So, here's some final thoughts for you today. As you're going through and thinking about your graduate and building that graduate funnel, they're already on your website. Okay, they've already been on your website. Most of the students who end up entering your graduate program have already sought you out as an undergrad, or they might be a current undergrad on your website or on your campus right now. So you need to construct a diverse, multi-layered approach to engaging with your prospective students and families and measure everything in real time. Graduate, as Chase said, churns all year round, all the time. It's not your typical recruitment cycle. Two, Gen Z is using several different tools to engage. You have to be mindful of that, and it'll change throughout the year. So being able to look at your dashboard and talk to your counselors, we're not getting anything back on our text messages, but we're really seeing some really good stuff on email. Concentrate your efforts in email, or if you're seeing more things in your digital advertising than you are, say, in your print campaign, maybe you spend a little bit more in your digital ad space versus your print space. But being able to make that change and speed to relevance is a big deal. Is a big deal because you need to meet them where they are, right? Meet them where they are. They are out there surfing all of these channels all of the time. How many times will you pick up your phone after we get off this webinar and the first thing you'll check is your email? Then you'll check Facebook. Then you'll text some and check your Twitter account, and then maybe you go to your LinkedIn account. It's a normal routine now. It's a normal routine. You churn it at home. It's going to be the same thing with the students as well. And lastly, data and measurement is key to success. Data and having that data and well-informed data in front of you allows you to make those choices on digital spend, on print spend, and how you invest your time and energy in your counseling staff. I cannot tell you how much burnout that we've seen over the last 2 or 3 years. where, here's a bunch of information, just start making phone calls. That's not how it works anymore. It's a waste of time. It's a waste of resources. Your biggest resource is your counseling staff or that dean or that director who's making those phone calls in your graduate space. So get your best tools together. Have a plan to manage those tools so you can make it through that process and be successful in the end. And don't be afraid to make changes. I think that's the biggest thing. Being able to change on the fly and make those decisions based upon data is important to your future. So next time, we are going to promote affordability for students and parents. We're going to have our next webinar. It's coming up on Thursday, October 27th, and we are going to be joined by Ed Recker from Sallie Mae and one of our account executives here, Derek Hartle, and we're going to talk about Sallie Mae's reports that had just come out recently about how students are paying for college, how families are paying for college, and how they're perceiving paying for college. And then Derek and we're going to talk about how you can get your messaging out to students and parents earlier so that it's more meaningful to them through the process. So we hope to see you then. We'll be sending out the link later, probably next week, for you to register for that event. So if you have any questions or comments or whatever, please feel free to reach us at any of our social media aspects, or you can email us directly, and we'd love to hear from you. So Sierra, that completes what we're going to be talking about today. I want to thank